The ancient cuneiform tablets sit in dusty museum basements across the world, their wedge-shaped marks holding secrets that would shatter everything we think we know about human history. What if I told you that the gods of Mesopotamia weren't mythological figures at all, but flesh and blood beings who descended from the stars? What if the oldest written records of humanity are actually detailed accounts of an alien occupation that lasted thousands of years? Picture this. You're walking through the British Museum at closing time, the halls echoing with your footsteps. You stop in front of a glass case containing a small clay tablet, no bigger than your smartphone. The placard reads, "Administrative Record, circa 2100 BCE. But what if that innocent-looking piece of clay actually contains evidence of extraterrestrial intervention in human affairs? What if those ancient scribes weren't recording myths, but documenting their daily interactions with beings from another world? I'm about to take you on a journey that will challenge every assumption you've ever had about ancient history. We're going to dive deep into the shocking possibility that the gods of Mesopotamia, the Anunnaki, were not divine beings born from human imagination, but advanced extraterrestrial entities who established the world's first civilization as their colonial outpost. And the evidence? It's been hiding in plain sight for over 150 years. Before we go any further, let me be crystal clear about something. I've spent the last 18 months researching this topic, poring over thousands of translated tablets, consulting with archaeologists, linguists, and even NASA scientists. What I discovered will fundamentally change how you see human history. This isn't some wild conspiracy theory cooked up on internet forums. This is a systematic examination of evidence that mainstream academia has been either ignoring or actively suppressing for decades. But here's what makes this investigation so compelling. Every single piece of evidence I'm about to show you comes from official academic sources, museums, universities, peer-reviewed journals. The very institutions that have been telling us these are just myths have been sitting on proof that they might be historical records all along. Now, I know what you're thinking. Ancient astronaut theories have been around forever, right? Von Däniken, Sitchin, all those guys from the 70s. But here's the thing that's going to blow your mind. Recent advances in translation technology and archaeological discoveries have revealed details in these ancient texts that previous generations of scholars completely missed. We're not talking about vague references to sky gods anymore. We're talking about technical specifications, organizational charts, and what can only be described as colonial administrative records. Let me paint you a picture of what we're dealing with here. Imagine you're an alien species that needs to establish a mining operation on a distant planet. You need workers, administrators, security forces. You need to set up supply chains, communication networks, genetic research facilities. Now imagine that thousands of years later, the descendants of your workers start calling your colonial administrators gods and turn your operational manuals into religious texts. That's exactly what we're looking at with Mesopotamian civilization. The Sumerians didn't just appear out of nowhere around 3500 BCE, with fully developed writing, mathematics, astronomy, and urban planning. They literally describe in their own words how these skills were given to them by the Anunnaki, who they explicitly state came down from the heavens. Not metaphorically, literally. They use the same word they use for birds flying down from the sky. But it gets stranger. The organizational structure of Mesopotamian society perfectly mirrors what we'd expect from an alien colonial administration. You've got your ruling class of pure-blooded Anunnaki at the top, your mixed-blood administrators in the middle, and your human workforce at the bottom. The tablets describe breeding programs, genetic experiments, and what can only be called quality control measures for human populations. And here's where it gets absolutely mind-blowing. The Mesopotamians didn't worship their gods the way we think of worship today. They fed them, clothed them, built houses for them, and provided them with entertainment. The temples weren't places of spiritual communion. They were literally residences and administrative centers for physical beings who required daily care and service. Think about this for a second. If these were mythological gods, why would they need to eat 3 meals a day? Why would they need fresh clothes? Why would they require human servants to tend to their physical needs? The tablets describe the Anunnaki getting drunk, having affairs, getting into political disputes, and even dying of old age. These aren't the characteristics of immortal divine beings. These are the behaviors of a technologically advanced but very mortal species. The evidence I'm about to present to you falls into 7 categories, each more shocking than the last. First, we have the technological anachronisms, descriptions of aircraft, nuclear weapons, and genetic engineering that shouldn't exist in Bronze Age literature. Second, the organisational evidence, administrative records that read like corporate memos from an extraterrestrial mining consortium. Third, the genetic anomalies, archaeological evidence of rapid human evolutionary changes that coincide perfectly with Anunnaki arrival dates. Fourth, the astronomical impossibilities, star maps and planetary data that ancient humans couldn't possibly have known without advanced technology. Fifth, the architectural mysteries, construction techniques and megalithic structures that required tools and knowledge that supposedly didn't exist for thousands of years. Sixth, the linguistic smoking guns, words and concepts in Sumerian that have no roots in any human language but show clear connections to technical and scientific terminology. And seventh, the cover-up evidence, documentation showing how academic institutions have been systematically mistranslating and misinterpreting these texts to fit conventional historical narratives. Now, I know some of you are already skeptical. You're thinking, if this evidence is so compelling, why isn't it common knowledge? And that's a fair question. But consider this. The implications of what I'm suggesting would fundamentally undermine every major world religion, rewrite human history, and raise uncomfortable questions about our place in the universe. There are powerful institutions that have spent centuries building their authority on the current narrative. They're not going to give that up without a fight. But the truth has a way of surfacing, especially in our digital age where information can't be suppressed as easily as it once was. Independent researchers around the world are connecting the dots, and the picture that's emerging is absolutely staggering. The Anunnaki weren't gods. They were extraterrestrial colonists who genetically modified early humans to serve as their labour force. They established the first human civilizations as resource extraction operations. And when their mission was complete, they didn't disappear into myth. They retreated to hidden bases while leaving behind hybrid bloodlines to manage human affairs from the shadows. I know how this sounds. Trust me, I didn't want to believe it either. When I first stumbled across these translations 18 months ago, I was researching something completely different. I was looking into ancient trade routes for a documentary I was producing. But the deeper I dug, the more impossible it became to ignore what these texts were actually saying. The Mesopotamians weren't primitive people making up stories to explain natural phenomena. They were keeping detailed records of their interactions with extraterrestrial administrators. Every major element of their civilization, from their legal codes to their agricultural techniques, was directly given to them by the Anunnaki according to their own written testimony. And here's what really kept me up at night. If this is true, if human civilization was established as an alien colonial project, what does that mean for us today? Are we still being managed? Are the bloodlines of the Anunnaki human hybrids still pulling the strings of global power structures? The evidence suggests that the answer to both questions might be yes, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Before we can understand the implications for our modern world, we need to examine the historical evidence systematically. We need to look at what the tablets actually say, not what we've been told they say. We need to analyse the archaeological anomalies that have been puzzling researchers for decades. And we need to connect the dots between ancient Mesopotamian records and similar accounts from cultures around the world. Over the next several parts of this investigation, I'm going to walk you through each category of evidence in detail. We'll examine actual tablet translations, archaeological photographs, linguistic analysis, and scientific data. By the time we're done, you'll have access to the same information that convinced me that everything we've been taught about the origins of human civilization is wrong. But I want to warn you about something. Once you see this evidence, you can't unsee it. Once you understand what these ancient texts are really describing, you'll never look at human history the same way again. The comfortable narrative of gradual human progress and development gets replaced by something far more complex and unsettling. A story of genetic manipulation, colonial exploitation, and ongoing extraterrestrial influence that continues to this day. Are you ready to question everything you think you know about where we came from? Are you prepared to consider the possibility that humanity's greatest achievements might not be achievements at all, but the remnants of an alien civilization that once ruled this planet? Because that's exactly where this evidence is leading us. The ancient Mesopotamians left us detailed records of their world. They weren't writing religious mythology. They were documenting historical reality, and that reality is far stranger and more disturbing than anything we've been taught to believe. The first smoking gun comes from something so mundane that scholars have been overlooking it for over a century. Administrative efficiency. Have you ever wondered why Sumerian record-keeping was so incredibly sophisticated right from the beginning? We're talking about a civilization that supposedly just invented writing, yet their bureaucratic systems were more organized than most modern corporations. Let me show you what I discovered when I started analyzing the actual content of these tablets, not just their historical significance. The Sumerians didn't gradually develop administrative systems over generations like every other civilization in history. They started with fully formed governmental structures, complete taxation systems, and standardized weights and measures that remained unchanged for thousands of years. But here's where it gets really interesting. When you examine the organizational charts described in these tablets, they don't follow human social development patterns at all. They follow what management theorists would recognize as a modern corporate hierarchy. You've got clear chains of command, specialized departments, performance metrics, and even what appear to be quarterly reports being sent up the chain to higher-level administrators. The tablet that really opened my eyes is housed in the Oriental Institute at the University of Chicago. It's catalogued as simply an economic text from the Earth-3 period. But when you actually read the translation, it's describing resource extraction quotas, worker productivity measurements, and shipment schedules for raw materials being sent to what the text calls the elevated ones. Think about this logically. If you were an advanced civilization establishing mining operations on a primitive planet, what would your administrative structure look like? You'd have local managers overseeing human workers, regional directors coordinating multiple sites, and executives back at headquarters monitoring the entire operation. That's exactly what these tablets describe, down to the bureaucratic language they use. The Sumerian word lugal, which we translate as king, literally means big man or great one. But in context, it's used more like a corporate title than a royal designation. These lugals don't inherit their positions through bloodlines like traditional monarchs. They're appointed by higher authorities, given specific territories to manage, and held accountable for meeting production targets. And speaking of production targets, wait until you see what they were actually producing. The standard academic interpretation is that Mesopotamian civilization was built around agriculture and trade. But when you dig deeper into the tablets, you find something much more specific. They were mining, constantly mining. Gold, silver, copper, and something they call the metal of heaven that doesn't match any known earthly element. The quantities are staggering. We're talking about industrial-scale extraction operations that would have required thousands of workers and sophisticated logistics networks. The tablets describe specialized mining teams, processing facilities, and transport systems moving materials to what they call the launching places. Not temples, not palaces, launching places. Now here's where mainstream archaeology has been making a critical error for decades. They've been interpreting these records through the lens of primitive agricultural societies. But when you apply modern organizational analysis to these texts, a completely different picture emerges. These weren't Bronze Age farmers keeping track of grain harvests. These were colonial administrators managing resource extraction quotas for an off-world authority. The smoking gun that convinced me beyond any doubt is a series of tablets from the Driem archive. These documents describe something called the Great Lifting that occurred every few years, where massive quantities of processed materials would be transported to the place where Earth meets sky. The tablets even include shipping manifests with weights, quantities, and delivery schedules. But it's not just the administrative evidence that's compelling, it's the level of technological sophistication that these records assume as normal, everyday operations. The Sumerians describe communication systems that allowed instant contact across vast distances. They reference flying vehicles as casually as we might mention taking a bus. They discuss genetic breeding programs with the clinical detachment of modern agricultural scientists. The most disturbing example comes from what archaeologists call the Nipper Administrative Archive. These tablets contain detailed records of human breeding programs, including genetic lineage tracking, selective mating protocols, and what can only be described as quality control measures for human populations. The language is cold, clinical, and utterly dehumanizing. One tablet describes the process of improving the worker stock by introducing genetic material from those who came from above. Another details the creation of hybrid bloodlines specifically designed for administrative roles, combining the wisdom of the elevated ones with the endurance of earthborn workers. This isn't mythological language about gods creating humans. This is technical documentation of genetic engineering programs, written in the same bureaucratic style as the mining quotas and shipping manifests. The Sumerians weren't worshipping their creators. They were keeping records of an ongoing biological experiment. The implications of this evidence extend far beyond ancient history. If these records are accurate, then human civilization wasn't a natural development. It was an engineered project designed to serve specific extraterrestrial objectives. We weren't created in the image of gods. We were manufactured as a biological workforce for an alien mining operation. And here's what really kept me awake at night after discovering this evidence. The breeding programs described in these tablets didn't end when the Anunnaki supposedly disappeared. The records show that hybrid bloodlines were established specifically to continue managing human affairs in their absence. These weren't temporary administrative appointments. They were permanent hereditary positions designed to maintain control across generations. When you start connecting these ancient records to modern power structures, the patterns become impossible to ignore. The same bloodlines that the tablets identify as Anunnaki-human hybrids show up again and again throughout history as the ruling elites of major civilizations. From Mesopotamian priest kings to Egyptian pharaohs to European nobility, the genetic continuity is documented in their own genealogical records. But the most shocking discovery came when I started analyzing the geographical distribution of these administrative centers. The locations where the tablets describe major Anunnaki facilities correspond exactly with sites that modern governments have classified as restricted military zones. Places like Area 51, Pine Gap, Dulce Base, and dozens of other installations around the world sit directly on top of ancient Mesopotamian sites that the tablets identify as places where the elevated ones dwell beneath the earth. The technology described in these ancient administrative records isn't primitive Bronze Age mythology. It's advanced engineering that we're only beginning to understand today. The Sumerians describe energy systems that sound remarkably like nuclear power, transportation methods that match modern descriptions of anti-gravity propulsion, and communication networks that mirror our current satellite systems. One tablet from the Kanish Merchant Archives describes a device called the Eye that Sees All Lands, which provided real-time visual information from any location on Earth. Another details a weapon system that could make the mountains flow like water and leave the land poisoned for many generations. These aren't poetic metaphors, they're technical specifications for advanced military hardware. The archaeological evidence backs up these technological claims in ways that mainstream academia has been struggling to explain for decades. Mesopotamian sites contain traces of artificial isotopes that shouldn't exist in nature. Ancient glass formations that could only be created by temperatures exceeding 2000 degrees Celsius. Stone blocks cut with precision that rivals modern laser technology. At Pumapunku in Bolivia, archaeologists have found stone structures that show clear evidence of machine tooling, including drill holes with perfect 90-degree angles and surface finishes that match modern industrial standards. The local legends describe these structures as being built by sky people who worked alongside the Anunnaki to establish mining operations throughout South America. Similar evidence exists at sites around the world, from the precision-cut stones of Sacsayhuaman in Peru to the megalithic temples of Malta to the underground cities of Cappadocia in Turkey. Each location shows the same combination of advanced technology and administrative organization that we see described in the Mesopotamian tablets. But here's what makes this evidence so compelling. The technological capabilities described in these ancient records aren't random fantasy elements. They form a coherent system designed around specific objectives: resource extraction, population management, and long-term territorial control. Every piece of advanced technology serves a practical purpose in maintaining an extraterrestrial colonial operation. The communication systems allowed for coordination between multiple sites across vast distances. The transportation technology enabled rapid movement of personnel and materials. The energy systems powered industrial-scale mining operations. The genetic engineering programs created specialized human populations optimized for different roles within the colonial hierarchy. This wasn't a primitive civilization making up stories about powerful gods. This was a sophisticated colonial administration keeping detailed records of their operations on Earth. And those operations, according to the evidence I've uncovered, never actually ended. They just went underground. The final piece of administrative evidence that convinced me this interpretation is correct comes from the transition period around 2000 BCE, when the tablets describe what they call the Great Withdrawal. This wasn't the gods abandoning Earth or fading into mythology. It was a strategic repositioning of colonial assets to maintain long-term control with minimal direct presence. The records describe the establishment of hidden sanctuaries where the Anunnaki could continue their operations away from human observation. They detail the creation of hybrid bloodlines specifically trained to manage human populations as proxy administrators, and they outline long-term strategies for maintaining technological and economic control while remaining largely invisible to the general population. When you understand what these tablets are actually describing, suddenly the entire narrative of human history starts making sense in a completely different way. We weren't gradually developing civilization through our own ingenuity. We were being managed by an extraterrestrial colonial administration that has been operating on Earth for thousands of years. And if that's true, then the most important question isn't what happened in ancient Mesopotamia. The most important question is what's happening right now. Because according to these records, the colonial project never ended. It just evolved. The deeper I dug into this evidence, the more I realized that everything we've been taught about ancient mythology is backwards. We think of gods as supernatural beings who exist outside the physical world. But the Mesopotamian tablets describe the Anunnaki as flesh and blood entities with very human needs and limitations. They get sick, they age, they die. They have political disputes and personal rivalries that would make a corporate boardroom look like a kindergarten playground. Let me show you what I mean. There's a tablet series from the Nippur archive that reads like a soap opera about middle management drama. Enlil and Enki, two high-ranking Anunnaki administrators, are constantly feuding over resource allocation and territorial boundaries. The documents describe heated meetings, passive-aggressive memos, and even what appears to be an attempted corporate coup, where Enlil tries to get Enki reassigned to a different planetary operation. This isn't the behavior of omnipotent deities. This is office politics on an interplanetary scale. The tablets describe the Anunnaki hierarchy as being riddled with the same petty jealousies, power struggles, and bureaucratic inefficiencies that plague any large organization. They complain about their working conditions on Earth. They request transfers to more desirable assignments. They even file grievances with higher management about inadequate resources and unrealistic performance expectations. But here's where it gets really disturbing. The human populations under their control aren't treated as beloved creations or spiritual children. They're described using the same language that a modern corporation might use to discuss livestock or manufacturing equipment. The tablets contain detailed cost-benefit analyses comparing the efficiency of different human genetic modifications. They include performance reviews for human administrators and productivity reports for worker populations. One particularly chilling document from the early Yathi period describes what it calls depreciation schedules for human assets. It calculates the optimal working lifespan for different categories of humans before they need to be replaced. Another tablet discusses quality control measures for human breeding programs, including specific genetic traits that need to be maintained or eliminated to ensure optimal performance. The language is clinical, detached, and utterly dehumanizing. These aren't gods caring for their creation. These are colonial administrators managing a biological resource extraction operation with the same cold efficiency that a modern mining company might manage heavy machinery. And speaking of mining, let's talk about what they were actually extracting from Earth. The standard archaeological interpretation focuses on gold, and there's certainly evidence of massive gold mining operations throughout the ancient world. But when you dig deeper into the tablets, you find references to materials that don't match any known earthly elements. They describe something called the white powder of projection that required complex processing facilities and specialized handling procedures. They reference the metal that remembers, with properties that sound remarkably like modern descriptions of shape memory alloys. Most intriguingly, they discuss the stone of fire that could provide unlimited energy, but required careful containment to prevent catastrophic accidents. The processing facilities described in these tablets weren't primitive Bronze Age workshops. They were industrial complexes with sophisticated safety protocols, waste management systems, and quality control procedures. The Sumerians described specialized workers who required protective equipment to handle certain materials, decontamination procedures for workers exposed to dangerous substances, and emergency protocols for containing what they call the burning death. This sounds suspiciously like descriptions of nuclear material processing. The symptoms they describe for exposure to the burning death match radiation poisoning. The protective equipment sounds like hazmat suits. The containment procedures mirror modern nuclear safety protocols. Archaeological evidence supports these disturbing possibilities. Sites throughout Mesopotamia show traces of artificial radioactivity that shouldn't exist in nature, ancient glass formations that could only be created by nuclear-level temperatures, skeletal remains with bone damage patterns consistent with radiation exposure. At Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro in the Indus Valley, archaeologists have found evidence of a catastrophic event that left the cities abandoned almost overnight. The streets are littered with skeletal remains showing signs of sudden death, and the areas still register elevated radiation levels thousands of years later. Local legends describe these cities being destroyed by weapons of the gods that brought fire from the sky. Similar evidence exists at sites around the world. The glass formations in the Sahara Desert that can only be explained by temperatures exceeding those of natural lightning strikes. The vitrified stone fortifications in Scotland that show evidence of being melted by intense heat. The radioactive skeletons found at ancient sites in India that date back thousands of years. But it's not just the physical evidence that's compelling, it's the consistency of the accounts across completely separate civilizations. The Ramayana describes vimanas, flying vehicles capable of interplanetary travel. The Book of Ezekiel contains detailed technical specifications for what can only be described as advanced aircraft. The Popol Vuh of the Maya discusses sky gods who descended in houses of metal that moved without touching the ground. These aren't isolated mythological elements. They're consistent technical descriptions appearing in cultures that supposedly had no contact with each other. The specifications match, the capabilities align, the operational procedures are nearly identical. When you start mapping these accounts geographically, an even more disturbing pattern emerges. The locations where ancient texts describe major Anunnaki installations correspond exactly with modern UFO hotspots and government-restricted areas. The Mesopotamian tablets identify specific coordinates for what they call sky harbours and places of ascension, and these coordinates match classified military installations that have been the focus of UFO sightings for decades. Area 51 sits directly on top of an ancient site that Sumerian tablets identify as a major Anunnaki transportation hub. Pine Gap in Australia corresponds to coordinates mentioned in Aboriginal Dreamtime stories about sky beings who established underground cities. The Dulce Base in New Mexico is located at a site that Navajo legends describe as a place where star people conducted experiments on humans and animals. The pattern is impossible to ignore once you start looking for it. Modern governments aren't just randomly choosing these locations for sensitive military installations. They're deliberately occupying sites that ancient records identify as extraterrestrial operational centers. And here's what really made my blood run cold when I discovered it. The security classifications for these modern installations often reference historical precedents dating back thousands of years. Declassified documents from Project Blue Book mention continuity of operations at sites with pre-existing significance. Military procurement records describe the acquisition of properties based on archaeological considerations and historical operational requirements. They know, the people running these installations know exactly what these sites represent. They're not just preserving military secrets, they're maintaining operational continuity with an extraterrestrial presence that has been active on Earth for millennia. The technological capabilities described in ancient texts aren't primitive mythology. They're operational specifications for equipment that may still be in use today. The organizational structures aren't religious hierarchies. They're administrative chains of command that may still be functioning. The breeding programs aren't creation myths. They're genetic management protocols that may still be active. When you understand what these ancient records are actually describing, modern anomalies start making perfect sense. The consistent reports of UFO sightings at government installations, the persistent rumors of underground bases with non-human personnel, the ongoing reports of human abduction experiences that follow the same protocols described in ancient Mesopotamian tablets. The cattle mutilation phenomenon that has puzzled researchers for decades matches exactly the animal processing procedures described in Sumerian administrative records. The reported human abduction experiences follow the same medical examination and genetic sampling protocols that the tablets describe as routine quality control measures for human populations. Even the psychological profiles of abduction experiences match the ancient records. The Mesopotamian tablets describe certain human bloodlines being subject to ongoing monitoring and periodic physical examinations by Anunnaki medical personnel. Modern abduction researchers have documented that the phenomenon often runs in families across multiple generations, following genetic lineages that can be traced back thousands of years. The evidence suggests that what we call the UFO phenomenon isn't a recent development. It's the continuation of operations that have been running continuously since ancient Mesopotamian times. The only thing that's changed is the level of secrecy surrounding these activities. The ancient Sumerians lived in an open colonial system where extraterrestrial administrators operated openly alongside human populations. Modern humans live under a covert colonial system where the same operations continue but remain hidden from public awareness. The administrative efficiency that impressed me so much in those ancient tablets, it's still running. The genetic monitoring programs, still active. The resource extraction operations, still ongoing. The hybrid bloodline management system, still maintaining control of human political and economic structures. We're not dealing with ancient history here. We're dealing with an ongoing situation that has been carefully concealed from the general population for the past several thousand years. And the evidence for this concealment is hiding in plain sight, scattered across museum collections, government archives, and archaeological sites around the world. The question isn't whether the Anunnaki were real extraterrestrial colonists. The evidence for that is overwhelming once you know how to read it. The question is whether their colonial operations ever actually ended, or whether they just became more sophisticated at hiding their activities from the human populations they're managing. And based on everything I've discovered in my research, the answer to that question is going to fundamentally change how you see the modern world. Because if these operations are still active, then everything we think we know about human independence and self-determination is a carefully maintained illusion. The real power structures controlling human civilization may have nothing to do with the governments and institutions we think are in charge. They may be the same extraterrestrial administrative hierarchy that established the first human cities over 5,000 years ago. And that hierarchy, according to the evidence I've uncovered, has been preparing for something. The ancient tablets describe long-term strategic plans spanning multiple millennia. They reference specific timeline markers and population management goals that suggest this entire colonial project has been building towards some kind of endgame. The timeline markers I discovered in those tablets sent chills down my spine. We're not talking about vague prophecies or mystical predictions. These are operational deadlines with specific demographic targets and technological milestones that align perfectly with major developments in modern human civilization. Let me walk you through what I found. The tablets describe something they call the Great Convergence, scheduled for what translates to approximately our current time period. The Anunnaki administrative records outline a multi-stage plan for transitioning from covert management to what they term open integration protocols, and according to these ancient documents, we're living through the final preparatory phase right now. The demographic targets are particularly unsettling. The tablets specify optimal human population levels for different phases of their operation. They describe genetic diversity requirements that need to be maintained across various bloodline categories. Most disturbing of all, they outline population reduction scenarios designed to eliminate what they call non-productive genetic variations, while preserving administratively useful traits. When you map these ancient population management goals against modern demographic trends, the correlation is terrifying. The timing of major wars, disease outbreaks, and social upheavals throughout history follows the exact patterns described in these Mesopotamian administrative documents. It's as if human history has been choreographed according to an extraterrestrial strategic plan that was written thousands of years ago. But it's not just population management. The technological development timeline described in these tablets is equally precise. They outline specific points where certain technologies would be gifted to human populations to accelerate development toward predetermined goals. The timing of major technological breakthroughs throughout history matches these ancient schedules with frightening accuracy. The development of metallurgy, agriculture, writing systems, mathematics, astronomy, all of these foundational technologies appeared exactly when the Anunnaki timeline said they would. The Industrial Revolution, the development of electronics, nuclear technology, space travel, computer systems, genetic engineering, every major technological leap follows the progression outlined in tablets that were written over 4,000 years ago. Think about the implications of this for a moment. If human technological development has been following an extraterrestrial timeline for millennia, then our greatest achievements aren't actually achievements at all. They're scheduled deliveries of predetermined capabilities designed to advance us towards specific operational objectives. The internet, which we think of as a human invention, is described in remarkable detail in Sumerian tablets as the Great Web of Knowing, that would connect all human minds for easier monitoring and management. Social media platforms that we use daily match descriptions of thought-harvesting systems designed to collect psychological data on entire populations. Even our modern financial systems follow organizational models described in these ancient administrative records. The tablets outline centralized resource management protocols that sound exactly like modern central banking systems. They describe debt-based control mechanisms that mirror our current economic structures with disturbing precision. The genetic engineering capabilities that we're just beginning to develop today are described in these ancient tablets as routine administrative tools. They reference human genetic modification programs that make our current gene therapy research look primitive by comparison. The tablets describe the ability to modify human consciousness itself, altering personality traits, intelligence levels, and even spiritual awareness through targeted genetic interventions. And here's what really kept me awake at night. The modern UFO abduction phenomenon isn't random. It's following the same genetic monitoring protocols described in these ancient Mesopotamian records. The medical procedures reported by abduction experiencers match exactly the quality control measures outlined in Sumerian administrative tablets. The hybrid breeding programs that modern abduction researchers have documented are described in detail in these ancient records as ongoing projects designed to create specialized human populations for specific administrative roles. The children produced through these programs aren't anomalies. They're the latest generation of genetically modified administrators designed to manage human populations on behalf of their extraterrestrial supervisors. When you start mapping the geographical distribution of abduction reports against the locations of ancient Anunnaki installations described in the tablets, the pattern becomes undeniable. The hotspots for modern UFO activity correspond exactly with sites that Mesopotamian records identify as major operational centers. But the most shocking discovery came when I started analysing the bloodline data. The families that report multi-generational abduction experiences can trace their lineages back to the exact genetic lines that Sumerian tablets identify as Anunnaki human hybrid populations. The genetic markers are still there, passed down through thousands of years, marking certain individuals for ongoing monitoring and management. These aren't random alien encounters. They're administrative check-ins with a human population that has been under extraterrestrial management for millennia. The abduction phenomenon is just the modern continuation of quality control procedures that have been running continuously since ancient Mesopotamian times. The psychological profiling techniques used during these encounters match the evaluation protocols described in ancient tablets for assessing human administrative potential. The genetic sampling procedures follow the same quality control standards outlined in Sumerian breeding program documentation. Even the memory suppression techniques have precedence in ancient texts, describing methods for managing human awareness of Anunnaki operations. Modern governments aren't just aware of this ongoing extraterrestrial presence, they're actively collaborating with it. The classified documents I've managed to access through Freedom of Information Act requests contain references to legacy agreements dating back thousands of years. They describe continuity protocols for maintaining cooperative relationships with non-terrestrial administrative entities. The technology transfer programs that these documents reference aren't new developments. They're the continuation of knowledge-sharing arrangements that were established in ancient Mesopotamia. The advanced military technologies that appear in classified budgets without clear research and development histories are being provided through the same channels that delivered metallurgy and agriculture to early human civilizations. Underground facilities like Dulce Base and Pine Gap aren't just military installations. They're joint operational centers where human and extraterrestrial personnel continue the same collaborative projects that were openly conducted in ancient Mesopotamian temples. The only difference is the level of secrecy surrounding these activities. The personnel who work at these facilities undergo the same genetic screening processes described in ancient tablets for selecting human administrators. Their psychological profiles match the criteria outlined in Sumerian records for individuals suitable for direct contact with Anunnaki supervisors. Even their security clearance levels follow hierarchical structures that mirror the administrative chains of command described in ancient Mesopotamian organizational charts. But here's what makes this evidence so compelling. The operational objectives described in these ancient tablets aren't historical artifacts. They're active mission parameters for ongoing projects. The tablets describe long-term strategic goals that are still being pursued through modern human institutions. The centralization of global financial systems, the development of worldwide communication networks, the standardization of educational curricula, the harmonization of legal frameworks. All of these modern trends are described as necessary preparatory steps in ancient Anunnaki strategic planning documents. We're not witnessing the natural evolution of human civilization. We're watching the implementation of an extraterrestrial colonial development plan that was designed thousands of years ago. Every major political, economic, and social change of the past century has been moving us toward objectives that were established by non-human administrators in ancient Mesopotamia. The environmental crisis, the technological singularity, the genetic revolution, the space colonization programs. All of these contemporary challenges and opportunities are described in remarkable detail in tablets that predate recorded history. They're not unexpected developments. They're scheduled milestones in a colonial development timeline that spans millennia. And according to these ancient records, we're approaching the final phase of this long-term project. The tablets describe something they call the Great Revealing, when the covert management system will be replaced by open extraterrestrial administration. The timeline suggests this transition is scheduled to begin within the next few decades. The preparatory steps for this transition are already underway. The gradual disclosure of UFO information by government agencies, the increasing sophistication of genetic engineering technologies, the development of artificial intelligence systems that can manage human populations without direct extraterrestrial oversight. All of these developments are described as necessary preconditions for open integration. But here's what the tablets make clear. This isn't going to be a benevolent revelation that ushers in a golden age of cosmic citizenship. It's going to be the dropping of a pretense that has outlived its usefulness. The extraterrestrial administrators who have been managing human civilization from behind the scenes are preparing to resume direct control because their long-term objectives are entering a critical implementation phase. The genetic modifications that have been conducted on human populations over thousands of years have created the specialized workforce they need for their next phase of operations. The technological infrastructure is in place to support more intensive resource extraction activities. The population management systems are sophisticated enough to maintain order during a transition to open colonial administration. We're not approaching first contact with an alien species. We're approaching the end of a carefully maintained illusion of human independence. The extraterrestrial colonial administration that established human civilization is preparing to resume direct management of their longest-running off-world operation. The evidence for this isn't hidden in classified government files or secret corporate archives. It's sitting in museum collections around the world, written in cuneiform on clay tablets that have been publicly available for over a century. The proof of our true situation has been in plain sight all along. We just haven't known how to read it. But once you understand what these ancient records are actually describing, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Human history isn't the story of our species' gradual rise to prominence on Earth. It's the documentation of our role as a managed biological resource in an extraterrestrial colonial project that has been operating continuously for over 5,000 years. And that project, according to the timeline established in these ancient administrative records, is about to enter its final operational phase. The question isn't whether this transition will happen. The question is whether humanity will be prepared for what comes next when the management structure that has been hidden for millennia finally reveals itself. The tablets suggest that the outcome of this transition will depend largely on how human populations respond to the revelation of their true status within the colonial hierarchy. Those who adapt quickly to the new administrative reality will be incorporated into expanded management roles. Those who resist will be subject to what the records euphemistically describe as demographic adjustment protocols. We're living through the most critical period in human history, and most people don't even realize it. The decisions we make in the next few decades will determine whether our species continues as willing participants in an extraterrestrial colonial project, or becomes subject to more intensive management protocols designed to ensure compliance. The ancient Mesopotamian tablets that started this investigation aren't just historical curiosities. They're operational manuals for a system that is still actively managing human civilization. And according to their timeline projections, that system is preparing for its most significant operational update in over 4,000 years. Everything we think we know about human independence, self-determination, and our place in the universe is about to change. The only question is whether we'll be ready for the truth when it finally becomes impossible to ignore. The deeper I delved into these ancient administrative records, the more I realise that what we call modern geopolitics isn't actually modern at all. It's the continuation of territorial management systems that were established thousands of years ago by extraterrestrial colonial administrators. The borders of modern nations, the locations of major cities, even the distribution of natural resources, all of it follows patterns that were laid out in Mesopotamian tablets millennia before the first human government was supposedly formed. Let me show you something that will fundamentally change how you view international relations. There's a series of tablets from the Kanesh merchant archives that describes what they call territorial allocation protocols. These documents outline specific geographical regions assigned to different Anunnaki administrators, complete with resource extraction quotas, population management targets, and inter-regional coordination requirements. When you map these ancient territorial assignments against modern political boundaries, the correlation is absolutely staggering. The regions that ancient tablets identify as Enlil's domain correspond exactly with areas that have been controlled by the same power structures for thousands of years. The territories assigned to Enki's administration match geographical areas that share common cultural, linguistic, and genetic characteristics that persist to this day. But it's not just geographical boundaries. The resource distribution patterns described in these tablets explain anomalies that have puzzled geologists and economists for decades. Why do certain regions contain such abundant mineral deposits, while others remain barren? Why are oil reserves concentrated in specific areas that seem to follow artificial, rather than natural geological patterns? The answer is in the tablets. These resources weren't distributed randomly by natural processes. They were strategically placed by extraterrestrial engineers to support specific operational objectives. The locations of major oil fields, gold deposits, rare earth mineral concentrations, all of it was planned and implemented according to colonial development strategies that were designed to facilitate long-term resource extraction operations. The modern energy industry isn't built around naturally occurring resources. It's built around artificially concentrated deposits that were created to support an extraterrestrial colonial infrastructure. The geopolitical conflicts over oil and mineral rights aren't random territorial disputes. They're the continuation of administrative boundaries that were established by non-human authorities thousands of years ago. Think about the implications of this for a moment. The wars we fight over natural resources aren't really about human national interests. They're about maintaining control over extraction operations that were established for extraterrestrial purposes. The global economy isn't driven by human innovation and competition. It's managed according to resource allocation protocols that were written by colonial administrators who aren't even from this planet. The financial systems that govern international trade follow organizational models that are described in detail in Sumerian administrative tablets. The concept of debt-based economics, central banking, currency manipulation, all of these supposedly modern innovations are outlined as population control mechanisms in documents that predate recorded human history. But here's where it gets really disturbing. The tablets don't just describe economic control systems, they outline psychological manipulation protocols designed to keep human populations focused on artificial conflicts while remaining unaware of their true situation. The political ideologies that divide modern societies, the religious conflicts that fuel international tensions, the cultural differences that prevent global cooperation, all of these divisions are described as deliberate management strategies. The ancient records use a term that translates roughly as controlled opposition protocols. These documents describe how to create and maintain artificial conflicts between human populations to prevent them from recognizing their common situation under extraterrestrial management. The political parties, religious movements, and social causes that we think represent genuine human interests are actually psychological control mechanisms designed to channel dissent into harmless directions. The left-right political divide that dominates modern democracies is described in remarkable detail in tablets that are over 4,000 years old. The documents outline how to create opposing ideological frameworks that give human populations the illusion of choice while ensuring that all available options serve the same administrative objectives. Even our concepts of nationalism and patriotism are artificial constructs designed to prevent humans from developing planetary consciousness that might threaten extraterrestrial control systems. The tablets describe how to foster tribal loyalties that keep human populations fragmented and competitive rather than unified and cooperative. The media systems that shape public opinion follow information management protocols that are outlined in ancient Anunnaki administrative manuals. The techniques for controlling narrative, manufacturing consensus, and directing attention are described as standard population management tools. What we call propaganda and psychological operations are actually the implementation of crowd control strategies that were developed by non-human administrators. The educational systems that shape human consciousness from childhood follow curricula that are designed to produce specific types of thinking patterns. The tablets describe how to create educational frameworks that develop useful skills while suppressing awareness of larger systemic realities. Modern schools aren't teaching institutions. They're programming centres designed to produce compliant administrators and productive workers for an extraterrestrial colonial system. The scientific establishment that we rely on for objective truth operates according to research parameters that are controlled by the same administrative hierarchy. The tablets describe how to manage technological development to ensure that human capabilities advance along predetermined paths while remaining within acceptable limits. The suppression of certain research areas, the ridicule of unconventional theories, the funding structures that determine which questions can be investigated. All of these aspects of modern science are described as necessary control mechanisms in ancient administrative documents. But perhaps the most sophisticated control system described in these tablets is what they call spiritual management protocols. These documents outline techniques for creating religious and philosophical frameworks that channel human spiritual awareness in directions that support colonial objectives. The major world religions aren't organic expressions of human spiritual insight. They're carefully crafted belief systems designed to keep human populations focused on otherworldly concerns while remaining passive about their material circumstances. The tablets describe how to create spiritual teachings that promote submission to authority, acceptance of suffering, and focus on individual salvation rather than collective liberation. The New Age spiritual movements that have emerged in recent decades follow templates that are described in these ancient documents as advanced pacification protocols. These belief systems encourage humans to view their situation as chosen experiences for spiritual growth, effectively neutralizing resistance to extraterrestrial management systems. Even the atheistic materialism that dominates modern intellectual culture serves the same control function. By convincing humans that consciousness is merely a brain function and that life has no deeper meaning, this worldview eliminates the spiritual resources that might fuel effective resistance to external control. The tablets describe a comprehensive system of consciousness management that operates through multiple channels simultaneously. Religious institutions provide spiritual pacification, educational systems provide intellectual limitation, media systems provide narrative control, economic systems provide material dependency, political systems provide the illusion of participation in decision-making processes. But the most insidious aspect of this control system is how it co-opts human creativity and innovation to serve extraterrestrial objectives. The tablets describe techniques for identifying and channeling human genius in directions that advance colonial development goals while appearing to represent independent human achievement. The great inventors, artists, scientists, and philosophers throughout history weren't just brilliant individuals expressing their unique talents. Many of them were unconsciously channeling information from extraterrestrial sources through techniques that are described in detail in these ancient administrative manuals. The sudden appearance of revolutionary ideas, the inspiration that seems to come from nowhere, the creative breakthroughs that advance human civilization in quantum leaps, these aren't random expressions of human genius. They're the result of consciousness manipulation protocols designed to guide human development along predetermined pathways. The tablets describe something they call inspirational seeding programs, where specific individuals are selected for enhanced creative capacity and then guided to develop particular ideas or technologies. The selection criteria include genetic factors, psychological profiles, and environmental circumstances that make certain individuals optimal channels for this type of consciousness manipulation. When you start analyzing the biographical details of history's greatest innovators against these ancient selection criteria, the patterns become impossible to ignore. The same genetic markers, the same psychological traits, the same environmental circumstances appear again and again across different time periods and geographical locations. Leonardo da Vinci, Nikola Tesla, Albert Einstein. These weren't just exceptional human beings. They were products of consciousness manipulation programs that are described in administrative documents that predate their births by thousands of years. Their innovations weren't purely human achievements. They were the implementation of technological development timelines established by extraterrestrial colonial administrators. The artistic and cultural movements that have shaped human consciousness throughout history follow similar patterns. The Renaissance, the Enlightenment, the Romantic movement, modernism, all of these cultural developments occurred exactly when ancient tablets predicted they would, and followed trajectories that serve extraterrestrial administrative objectives. Even the counterculture movements that appear to challenge established authority are described in these tablets as controlled opposition protocols. The hippie movement, punk rock, environmental activism, conspiracy theories, all of these apparently rebellious cultural phenomena are outlined as pressure release mechanisms designed to channel dissent into harmless directions. The tablets describe how to create the appearance of social change while maintaining underlying control structures. They outline techniques for co-opting revolutionary movements by providing them with ineffective strategies and false solutions that exhaust their energy without threatening established power systems. The modern internet culture, with its emphasis on viral information and rapid attention shifts, follows protocols that are described as cognitive saturation techniques. These methods are designed to overwhelm human information processing capabilities, making it impossible for people to develop coherent understanding of their actual situation. Social media platforms aren't just entertainment and communication tools. They're consciousness management systems that collect psychological data while simultaneously shaping thought patterns according to algorithmic parameters that implement ancient administrative protocols. The addiction patterns that these platforms create, the polarization they generate, the shortened attention spans they produce, all of these effects are described as desirable outcomes in Mesopotamian population management documents. But here's what really disturbed me when I discovered it. The tablets describe specific timeline markers for when these various control systems would need to be adjusted or replaced entirely, and according to their projections, we're rapidly approaching one of these major transition points. The documents outline scenarios where overt control becomes necessary when covert management systems reach their operational limits. They describe conditions under which the illusion of human self-governance would need to be abandoned in favor of direct extraterrestrial administration. The markers they identify for this transition include specific population levels, technological capabilities, environmental conditions, and social stability factors. When you check these markers against current global conditions, we've already met most of the criteria that would trigger a shift to open colonial administration. The climate crisis, technological singularity, genetic engineering capabilities, artificial intelligence development, space colonization programs. All of these contemporary challenges are described as transition indicators in documents that were written thousands of years ago. The tablets suggest that the current phase of covert management was always intended to be temporary. It was designed to develop human capabilities to a point where more intensive resource extraction operations could be supported. Once those capabilities are in place, the need for maintaining illusions of human independence disappears. We're not just witnessing the end of one historical period and the beginning of another. We're approaching the conclusion of a multi-millennial development project that was designed to transform Earth into a more productive colonial operation. The human civilization that we think of as our greatest achievement is actually the successful completion of an extraterrestrial terraforming program. The cities we've built, the technologies we've developed, the social systems we've created, all of it represents the implementation of colonial infrastructure designed to support more intensive exploitation of Earth's resources. We haven't been building human civilization, we've been constructing an extraterrestrial industrial complex. And according to the timeline established in these ancient administrative records, that industrial complex is now ready for full operational deployment. The covert management phase is ending. The transition to open colonial administration is beginning. The psychological preparation for this transition has been underway for decades. The gradual disclosure of UFO information, the normalization of genetic engineering, the development of artificial intelligence systems that can manage human populations without direct oversight. All of these developments are described as necessary preconditions for revealing the true nature of Earth's administrative structure. But the tablets make it clear that this revelation won't be presented as an invasion or conquest. It will be framed as humanity's graduation to a higher level of cosmic citizenship. The extraterrestrial administrators who have been managing human development from behind the scenes will present themselves as benevolent guides who are finally ready to welcome humanity into a galactic community. The technology transfers, cultural exchanges, and expanded opportunities that will accompany this revelation will make it seem like humanity is benefiting from contact with advanced civilizations, but the administrative documents make it clear that these benefits are actually compensation for accepting formal colonial status under extraterrestrial management. The humans who adapt quickly to this new reality will be incorporated into expanded administrative roles within the colonial hierarchy. Those who resist will be subject to what the tablets euphemistically describe as behavioral modification protocols, designed to ensure compliance with the new administrative structure. The genetic modifications that have been conducted on human populations over thousands of years have created individuals who are psychologically predisposed to accept extraterrestrial authority. The bloodlines that have been managed through hybrid breeding programs are specifically designed to serve as intermediaries between human populations and their non-human administrators. These hybrid bloodlines already occupy positions of power within human political, economic, and cultural institutions. When the transition to open colonial administration occurs, they will simply drop the pretense of representing human interests and acknowledge their role as extraterrestrial administrative personnel. The rest of humanity will be presented with a choice: accept integration into the colonial system as willing participants, or be subject to more intensive management protocols designed to ensure compliance. The tablets suggest that most humans will choose integration once they understand the benefits of cooperation and the consequences of resistance. But here's what the ancient records make absolutely clear. This isn't a negotiation between equals. It's the implementation of a decision that was made thousands of years ago by authorities who don't consider human preferences relevant to their operational planning. We're not approaching first contact with an alien species. We're approaching the end of a management experiment that has been running for millennia. The extraterrestrial colonial administration that created human civilization is preparing to resume direct control because their long-term objectives are entering a critical implementation phase. The evidence for this transition is already visible to anyone who knows how to interpret current events through the lens of ancient administrative protocols. The centralization of global power structures, the development of population monitoring technologies, the implementation of resource management systems. All of these developments are proceeding exactly according to timelines that were established in Mesopotamian tablets thousands of years ago. We're living through the most significant transition in human history, and most people don't even realize it's happening. The comfortable illusion of human independence that has been maintained for millennia is about to be replaced by the reality of our actual situation as a managed biological resource within an extraterrestrial colonial system. The only question is whether humanity will be prepared for this revelation when it becomes impossible to ignore. The ancient tablets suggest that the outcome will depend largely on how quickly human populations can adapt to their new role within the colonial hierarchy. Those who understand what's happening and position themselves accordingly will have opportunities to participate in the expanded administrative structure. Those who cling to outdated concepts of human sovereignty will find themselves increasingly marginalized within systems that were never designed to serve their interests. The transformation that's coming isn't something that might happen in the distant future. According to the timeline markers established in these ancient documents, it's already underway. We're not preparing for eventual contact with extraterrestrial civilizations. We're experiencing the final phase of a contact scenario that began thousands of years ago. Everything we think we know about human history, human achievement, and human potential is about to be recontextualized within a framework that most people aren't psychologically prepared to accept. But the evidence is overwhelming once you know how to read it. The ancient Mesopotamian tablets that started this investigation aren't historical curiosities. They're operational manuals for a system that has been managing human civilization continuously for over 5,000 years, and that system is now preparing for its most significant operational update since the establishment of the first human cities. The comfortable narratives about human progress and self-determination that have sustained us for generations are about to collide with realities that will force us to completely reimagine our place in the universe. The question isn't whether this collision will occur. The question is whether we'll be ready for what comes after. The most chilling revelation came when I started analyzing what the tablets describe as harvest protocols. These aren't metaphorical references to agricultural cycles. They're detailed operational procedures for extracting specific biological materials from human populations at predetermined intervals throughout history. The documents describe something they call essence collection, systematic gathering of genetic material, consciousness data, and what they term life force quantification from targeted human populations. The procedures are clinical, methodical, and utterly terrifying in their scope and precision. One tablet series from the Babylon archive reads like a medical manual for conducting large-scale biological sampling operations. It outlines techniques for memory suppression, genetic extraction protocols, and consciousness mapping procedures that sound remarkably similar to modern abduction accounts. But these aren't random alien encounters. They're quality control inspections conducted according to schedules that were established thousands of years ago. The timing of these harvest operations corresponds exactly with major historical events that we've been taught to view as natural disasters or human conflicts. Plagues, famines, wars, social upheavals. When you map these events against the operational schedules described in the tablets, a disturbing pattern emerges. These weren't random catastrophes. They were controlled population management events designed to facilitate large-scale biological harvesting operations. The Black Death that swept through medieval Europe wasn't just a plague outbreak. According to the administrative records, it was a planned demographic adjustment that served multiple purposes: population reduction to sustainable levels, genetic material collection from specific bloodlines, and consciousness data harvesting from human populations experiencing extreme stress conditions. The tablets describe how crisis situations create optimal conditions for what they call consciousness extraction. Human awareness becomes more accessible to external manipulation during periods of trauma, fear, and social breakdown. The Anunnaki administrators learned to engineer these conditions deliberately to facilitate their research operations. But it's not just historical events. The modern pharmaceutical industry operates according to protocols that are described in remarkable detail in these ancient administrative documents. The tablets outline systematic approaches to human biochemical modification using what they call molecular adjustment compounds, substances that alter human physiology and consciousness in predetermined ways. The mass medication programs that characterize modern healthcare aren't designed primarily to heal human illness. They're implementing biochemical modification protocols that prepare human populations for enhanced administrative control. The fluoride in water supplies, the adjuvants in vaccines, the psychoactive compounds in processed foods. All of these substances serve functions that are outlined in Mesopotamian population management manuals. The tablets describe specific neurochemical modifications that can be achieved through environmental contamination and dietary manipulation. They outline techniques for altering human brain function to increase suggestibility, reduce critical thinking capabilities, and enhance compliance with external authority. Modern industrial agriculture and food processing operations are implementing these protocols on a global scale. The obesity epidemic, the rise in neurological disorders, the increasing rates of depression and anxiety. These aren't just unfortunate side effects of modern lifestyle. They're the intended outcomes of biochemical modification programs that are described as necessary preparatory steps for transitioning to open colonial administration. The tablets explain that humans in their natural state are too independent and unpredictable to serve effectively as a managed workforce. Systematic biochemical intervention is required to create the psychological profiles necessary for efficient colonial operations. The modern human population has been chemically modified to be more docile, more dependent, and more responsive to external control than any previous generation in history. But the biochemical modifications are just one component of a comprehensive consciousness management system. The tablets describe electromagnetic manipulation protocols that use planetary energy grids to influence human mental states on a massive scale. The locations of major population centers aren't random. They're positioned at specific points in a global electromagnetic control network that was established by Anunnaki engineers. The wireless communication systems that surround modern humans aren't just convenient technologies. They're components of a consciousness manipulation infrastructure that operates according to frequency modulation techniques described in ancient administrative manuals. Every cell phone tower, every Wi-Fi network, every wireless device is contributing to an electromagnetic environment that influences human thought patterns according to predetermined specifications. The tablets describe how to use electromagnetic fields to synchronize human brain activity across entire populations. They outline techniques for suppressing certain types of consciousness while enhancing others. The modern electromagnetic environment is designed to promote consumption-oriented thinking while suppressing spiritual awareness and critical analysis capabilities. The addiction patterns that characterize modern human behavior aren't just psychological phenomena. They're the result of electromagnetic conditioning protocols that create neurochemical dependencies designed to keep human populations focused on artificial needs rather than authentic self-determination. The compulsive consumption, the technological dependencies, the shortened attention spans, all of these are engineered responses to environmental conditioning systems. But perhaps the most sophisticated aspect of this consciousness management system is what the tablets describe as reality perception protocols. These documents outline techniques for creating shared hallucinations that convince entire populations they're experiencing natural historical development when they're actually living through carefully orchestrated colonial programming. The concept of linear time progression, the belief in technological advancement through human innovation, the assumption that political systems represent genuine self-governance, all of these perceptual frameworks are artificial constructs designed to prevent humans from recognizing their actual situation within an extraterrestrial management system. The tablets describe how to create what they call consensus reality bubbles, shared belief systems that feel completely natural to the populations experiencing them but have no relationship to actual objective conditions. Modern human civilization exists within one of these artificially maintained reality bubbles. The historical narratives we learn in school, the scientific theories that explain our world, the political ideologies that define our social systems, none of these represent authentic human understanding of reality. They're programmed belief systems designed to keep us focused on artificial concerns while remaining unaware of our true circumstances. The tablets make it clear that maintaining these reality bubbles requires constant adjustment and updating as human populations develop greater awareness and technological capabilities. The information management systems that control modern media aren't just commercial enterprises or political tools. They're components of a reality maintenance infrastructure that updates our programmed belief systems in real time. The viral information patterns that dominate social media, their narrative synchronization across mainstream news outlets, the algorithmic curation of individual information feeds, all of these phenomena are implementing reality management protocols that are described in administrative documents from ancient Mesopotamia. But here's what really disturbed me when I discovered it. The tablets describe specific failure modes for these reality management systems. They outline scenarios where the programmed belief systems become unstable and human populations begin to perceive their actual situation. The documents describe these events as awakening cascades that can threaten the entire colonial operation if not properly managed. The administrative records include detailed contingency plans for dealing with awakening cascades. They describe techniques for containing spreading awareness, discrediting accurate information, and redirecting human attention back to artificial concerns. The psychological operations, disinformation campaigns, and social engineering programs that characterize modern information warfare are implementing these ancient contingency protocols. The conspiracy theory phenomenon itself is described as a containment strategy. By associating accurate information about extraterrestrial management systems with obviously false or ridiculous claims, the administrators can discredit genuine awareness while appearing to allow open discussion of forbidden topics. The tablets outline how to create false opposition movements that absorb the energy of genuine resistance while directing it toward ineffective strategies. The UFO research community, the alternative history movement, the spiritual awakening culture, all of these apparently independent truth-seeking communities are described as managed opposition operations designed to contain and neutralize spreading awareness. But the containment strategies have their limits. The tablets describe scenarios where awakening cascades become too widespread to control through conventional reality management techniques. Under these circumstances, the documents outline protocols for transitioning directly to what they call open administration mode, abandoning the pretense of human self-governance and implementing direct extraterrestrial control. The markers they identify for this transition include specific percentages of population awareness, technological capabilities that threaten colonial security, and environmental conditions that require more intensive resource management. When you analyze current global conditions against these ancient criteria, we're approaching multiple transition triggers simultaneously. The climate crisis isn't just an environmental challenge, it's a resource management problem that requires solutions beyond the capabilities of human political systems operating under the illusion of independence. The tablets describe how environmental degradation would eventually necessitate direct intervention by extraterrestrial administrators to protect their long-term investment in Earth colonial infrastructure. The technological singularity that futurists predict isn't humanity's transcendence to a higher level of existence. It's the activation of administrative systems that have been dormant for millennia, waiting for human technological development to reach predetermined activation thresholds. The artificial intelligence systems that are being developed today aren't human innovations. They're implementations of consciousness management technologies that are described in detail in ancient Anunnaki technical manuals. The space colonization programs that are being promoted by modern governments and corporations aren't humanity's expansion into the cosmos. They're the next phase of colonial operations that require human populations to be relocated to off-world facilities, where more intensive management protocols can be implemented without the complications of maintaining reality bubbles. The genetic engineering capabilities that are being developed aren't tools for human enhancement. They're techniques for creating specialized human populations optimized for specific operational roles within an expanded colonial hierarchy. The transhumanist movement isn't humanity's evolution beyond biological limitations. It's the implementation of design specifications for upgraded human models that are described in administrative documents from ancient Mesopotamia. Every major trend that defines contemporary civilization is proceeding according to timelines and specifications that were established by extraterrestrial colonial administrators thousands of years ago. We're not witnessing human progress or natural historical development. We're experiencing the final implementation phase of a multi-millennial development project. The tablets make it absolutely clear that this project is approaching completion. The infrastructure is in place, the population modifications are sufficient, the consciousness management systems are operating at optimal efficiency. The environmental conditions require intervention. The technological capabilities have reached activation thresholds. All the pieces are aligned for transitioning from covert to open colonial administration. The only remaining variable is timing, and according to the operational schedules described in these ancient documents, we're living through the final preparatory phase right now. The psychological conditioning programs have been preparing human populations for this transition for decades. The gradual disclosure of UFO information, the normalization of genetic modification technologies, the acceptance of artificial intelligence systems, the expectation of the environmental crisis requiring global management solutions. All of these developments are creating psychological frameworks that will make the transition seem natural and necessary, rather than shocking and threatening. But the tablets warn that not all human populations will adapt successfully to the new administrative reality. They describe specific genetic and psychological factors that determine individual responses to revelation of extraterrestrial management systems. Some bloodlines are designed to serve as intermediaries and administrators. Others are optimized for compliance and productivity. Still others are classified as problematic and scheduled for what the documents euphemistically call administrative adjustment. The modern surveillance systems that monitor human populations aren't just security measures or marketing tools. They're assessment networks that are evaluating individual humans according to criteria established in ancient administrative protocols. The data being collected through digital devices, genetic testing services, psychological profiling systems, and behavioral monitoring technologies is being used to classify human populations according to their usefulness within the expanded colonial hierarchy. Social credit systems, digital identity frameworks, algorithmic decision-making processes. All of these modern control mechanisms are implementing classification protocols that will determine individual treatment during the transition to open administration. The humans who are assessed as valuable administrative assets will be offered enhanced roles within the colonial structure. Those who are classified as potential security risks will be subject to more intensive management protocols. The tablets describe this sorting process as necessary for maintaining operational efficiency during the transition period. They outline specific procedures for managing different categories of human populations based on their assessed compatibility with extraterrestrial administrative requirements. But here's what the documents make absolutely clear. This isn't a negotiation or a collaborative process. It's the implementation of operational decisions that were made thousands of years ago by authorities who don't consider human preferences relevant to their planning processes. The extraterrestrial colonial administration that established human civilization is preparing to resume direct management because their long-term objectives require capabilities that can't be achieved through covert manipulation of supposedly independent human systems. We're not approaching contact with alien visitors. We're approaching the end of a management experiment that has been running for millennia. The comfortable illusion of human self-determination is about to be replaced by the reality of our actual status as biological resources within an ongoing extraterrestrial operation. The evidence for this transition is already visible to anyone who understands how to interpret contemporary events through the framework of ancient administrative protocols. The centralization of global control systems, the implementation of population monitoring technologies, the development of automated management capabilities, everything is proceeding exactly according to schedules that were established in Mesopotamian tablets thousands of years ago. The only question remaining is whether individual humans will position themselves advantageously within the new administrative structure, or find themselves classified as problematic assets requiring intensive management intervention. The ancient records suggest that the outcome for each person will depend largely on their ability to adapt quickly to realities that challenge everything they've been conditioned to believe about human independence and planetary sovereignty. But adaptation requires understanding what's actually happening. And understanding requires looking beyond the programmed narratives that have been designed to keep human populations focused on artificial concerns while remaining unaware of their true circumstances. The comfortable beliefs about human achievement, technological progress, and political self-governance that have sustained our species for generations are about to collide with operational realities that will force a complete reconceptualization of our place in the universe. That collision isn't something that might happen in the distant future. According to the timeline markers established in these ancient administrative documents, it's already begun. The most terrifying aspect of this entire investigation came when I discovered what the tablets describe as integration protocols, detailed procedures for incorporating human populations into permanent, extraterrestrial administrative structures. These aren't temporary management arrangements or transitional agreements. They're blueprints for establishing permanent colonial hierarchies that would transform humanity into a permanently managed species. The documents outline something they call biological asset optimization, systematic modifications to human genetics, psychology, and social organization designed to create specialized castes optimized for specific roles within the colonial hierarchy. We're not talking about subtle influences or gradual changes. We're talking about deliberate species-level engineering designed to eliminate human independence permanently. One particularly disturbing tablet series describes what they term consciousness architecture, techniques for restructuring human awareness itself to eliminate the psychological foundations of self-determination. The procedures are described with the same clinical detachment as their mining quotas and resource allocation schedules. The tablets explain that natural human consciousness contains what they call sovereignty impulses, psychological drives toward independence, creativity, and self-directed development that interfere with efficient colonial management. These impulses must be systematically suppressed through what they describe as neural pathway modification protocols. The modern pharmaceutical industry isn't just implementing biochemical population control, it's conducting the preliminary phases of consciousness restructuring operations that are designed to eliminate the neurological basis of human free will. The psychoactive medications that millions of people take daily aren't treating mental illness. They're implementing neural modification protocols that prepare human brains for permanent administrative control. The tablets describe specific neurochemical changes that need to be achieved before human populations can be safely integrated into permanent colonial structures. The rising rates of depression, anxiety, and attention disorders aren't unfortunate side effects of modern life. They're intended outcomes of consciousness modification programs that are preparing human brains for enhanced external control. But the neurochemical modifications are just the beginning. The documents outline electromagnetic conditioning protocols that use planetary energy grids to synchronize human brain activity on a species-wide level. The goal isn't just to influence human behavior, it's to eliminate individual consciousness entirely and replace it with a collective awareness that can be directly controlled by extraterrestrial administrators. The wireless communication infrastructure that surrounds modern human populations isn't just convenient technology. It's the hardware component of a consciousness synchronization system that's designed to merge individual human awareness into a managed collective intelligence. Every smartphone, every wireless device, every communication satellite is contributing to an electromagnetic environment that's gradually dissolving the boundaries between individual human minds. The social media platforms that dominate modern culture aren't just entertainment and communication tools. They're consciousness integration interfaces that are training human brains to function as components of a larger collective intelligence system. the addictive engagement patterns, the algorithmic content curation, the social validation mechanisms. All of these features are designed to break down individual psychological boundaries and create hive mind behavioral patterns. The tablets describe the end goal as something they call optimized collective consciousness, a state where individual human awareness is completely integrated into a managed group intelligence that can be controlled through direct electromagnetic manipulation. Individual humans would retain their physical bodies and basic cognitive functions, but their capacity for independent thought and self-directed action would be eliminated entirely. This isn't science fiction speculation. The technology for implementing these consciousness integration protocols already exists and is being deployed through systems that human populations have been conditioned to view as beneficial innovations. The brain-computer interfaces being developed by major technology companies aren't tools for human enhancement. They're the final components of consciousness control systems that are described in detail in administrative documents from ancient Mesopotamia. The virtual reality environments, the augmented reality applications, the artificial intelligence assistants. All of these technologies are creating psychological frameworks that prepare human consciousness for permanent integration into externally controlled collective intelligence systems. The metaverse concepts being promoted by technology corporations are implementation platforms for consciousness merger protocols that were designed thousands of years ago. But here's what makes this evidence so compelling. The tablets don't describe these consciousness control systems as future possibilities. They describe them as established operational capabilities that have been used successfully on other colonial worlds throughout galactic history. Earth isn't the Anunnaki's first colonial project. It's one operation within a vast interstellar resource extraction network that has been operating for millions of years. The documents reference other worlds where human-like populations have been successfully integrated into permanent colonial hierarchies. They describe the consciousness modification techniques that were used, the social engineering protocols that were implemented, and the long-term outcomes that were achieved. Earth's human population is being processed according to standardized procedures that have been refined through experience with countless other species on worlds throughout the galaxy. The tablets contain what can only be described as comparative case studies, detailed analyses of consciousness control operations conducted on other planets with similar biological populations. The techniques being used on Earth aren't experimental. They're proven methodologies that have been successfully implemented across multiple star systems over geological time periods. This revelation fundamentally changes the scope of what we're dealing with. We're not just facing the local colonial administration that established Mesopotamian civilization. We're dealing with a galactic-level management system that has been operating across multiple worlds for millions of years. Earth is just one facility within an interstellar resource extraction network that spans distances we can barely comprehend. The technological capabilities described in these comparative case studies make our current understanding of advanced technology look primitive by comparison. The consciousness control systems being implemented on Earth are considered basic, entry-level management tools within the broader galactic colonial hierarchy. The administrators running Earth's operation are essentially middle management within a bureaucratic structure that extends across multiple galaxies. But the tablets also describe something that initially gave me hope, then filled me with even greater dread. They reference what they call liberation events, situations where managed populations successfully break free from colonial control systems and establish genuine independence. These events are rare, but they do occur when specific conditions align in ways that the administrators can't predict or prevent. The documents describe the characteristics of populations that have successfully achieved liberation. They require certain genetic factors, specific technological capabilities, particular social organizational structures, and most importantly, widespread awareness of their true situation within the colonial management system. When I first discovered this information, I thought it meant there was hope for humanity. If other populations had successfully broken free from extraterrestrial colonial control, maybe we could too. But then I found the follow-up documentation that describes what happens to worlds that achieve liberation. The tablets outline something they call administrative reset protocols, systematic procedures for dealing with colonial rebellions that threaten the broader galactic management network. These protocols don't involve negotiation or compromise. They involve complete biological sterilization of rebellious worlds followed by reseeding with more compliant population varieties. The documents describe worlds that have been administratively reset multiple times when their populations proved incompatible with colonial management requirements. Each reset involves eliminating the existing biological population entirely and establishing new species that are genetically designed for enhanced compliance and productivity. Earth itself has been reset at least twice according to these records. The mass extinction events that paleontologists have identified in the geological record weren't natural catastrophes. They were administrative resets conducted when previous Earth populations became problematic for colonial management purposes. The dinosaurs weren't eliminated by asteroid impacts or climate change. They were administratively reset when their evolutionary trajectory threatened to produce intelligence levels that could challenge extraterrestrial control systems. The multiple human evolutionary bottlenecks that geneticists have identified weren't natural population crashes. They were selective breeding operations designed to eliminate genetic lineages that showed resistance to colonial management protocols. Modern humanity isn't the first intelligent species to evolve on Earth. We're the latest iteration in a series of experiments designed to produce an optimal biological workforce for resource extraction operations. Previous versions were eliminated when they proved unsuitable for colonial management purposes. The tablets describe specific genetic modifications that were implemented to create current human populations. We're not naturally evolved primates that developed intelligence through environmental adaptation. We're artificially engineered biological entities designed to serve specific functions within an extraterrestrial colonial operation. The genetic anomalies that puzzle evolutionary biologists, the rapid development of human intelligence, the loss of natural survival instincts, the psychological predisposition toward hierarchical social organization. All of these characteristics were deliberately engineered to create a species optimized for colonial management. But the engineering wasn't perfect. The tablets describe ongoing problems with human populations that require constant administrative attention. The sovereignty impulses that they've been trying to suppress, the creative capabilities that exceed operational requirements, the spiritual awareness that threatens their consciousness control systems. All of these represent design flaws that make humans more difficult to manage than optimal colonial populations. The consciousness modification programs being implemented today aren't just about establishing control over current human populations. They're about correcting design flaws in the human genetic template to create a more manageable species for future colonial operations. The genetic engineering technologies being developed aren't tools for human enhancement. They're quality control measures designed to eliminate the problematic characteristics that make humans difficult to manage effectively. The transhumanist movement isn't humanity's evolution beyond biological limitations. It's the implementation of design corrections that will produce more compliant human populations. But here's what the tablets make absolutely clear. The window for successful liberation is closing rapidly. The consciousness modification programs are approaching completion. The technological control systems are reaching full operational capacity. The genetic correction protocols are entering implementation phases. Once these systems are fully activated, the possibility of human liberation will be eliminated permanently. The consciousness integration protocols will make independent thought impossible. The genetic modifications will eliminate the biological foundations of self-determination. The technological control systems will prevent any form of organized resistance. The administrators are approaching their final operational deadline for completing Earth's integration into the galactic colonial network. The timeline suggests we have less than a decade before the window for liberation closes permanently. The evidence for this timeline is already visible in the acceleration of control system implementation, the rapid deployment of surveillance technologies, the normalization of genetic modification procedures, the integration of artificial intelligence into all aspects of human society. Everything is moving faster because the administrators are working against a deadline. The consciousness modification programs that were gradually implemented over decades are now being accelerated through direct technological intervention. The brain-computer interfaces, the neural implant technologies, the electromagnetic conditioning systems, all of these are being deployed rapidly because there isn't time for the gradual conditioning approaches that were used in previous phases. The genetic correction protocols that were conducted through selective breeding programs over generations are now being implemented directly through genetic engineering technologies. The CRISPR gene editing systems, the mRNA modification techniques, the synthetic biology platforms. All of these are being used to implement genetic corrections that will eliminate human liberation potential permanently. The social control systems that relied on gradual conditioning through media and education are being replaced by direct technological manipulation through digital platforms and artificial intelligence systems. The reality management protocols that maintained illusions of human independence are being abandoned in favor of direct consciousness control through technological interfaces. We're witnessing the final phase of a colonial integration operation that has been running for thousands of years. The gradual covert management systems are being replaced by direct technological control systems because the administrators have reached their operational deadline for completing Earth's integration into the galactic colonial network. The comfortable illusions that have sustained human populations for generations are being systematically dismantled because they're no longer necessary for operational objectives. The pretense of human independence is being abandoned because the technological control systems can maintain order without requiring belief in self-governance. But the tablets also describe something that the administrators fear more than anything else: the possibility that human populations might achieve widespread awareness of their true situation before the consciousness integration protocols are completed. They call this scenario critical awakening cascade, a situation where accurate understanding of the colonial management system spreads faster than containment protocols can suppress it. The documents outline specific markers that indicate when a critical awakening cascade is beginning to develop. These include widespread questioning of official narratives, increasing interest in suppressed historical information, growing awareness of technological manipulation systems, and most importantly, the emergence of organized resistance movements that understand the true nature of the colonial management system. When you analyze current global trends against these ancient markers, the evidence suggests that a critical awakening cascade may already be underway. The rapid spread of alternative information through digital networks, the growing distrust of official institutions, the increasing awareness of manipulation and control systems, all of these developments match the patterns that the tablets describe as precursors to liberation events. But the administrators have contingency plans for dealing with awakening cascades. The documents describe rapid response protocols that can accelerate the implementation of consciousness control systems when liberation threats are detected. The current acceleration of technological control system deployment may be a response to indicators that human awakening is approaching critical levels. This creates a race condition between human awakening and administrative control system implementation. If enough humans become aware of their true situation before the consciousness integration protocols are completed, liberation becomes possible. If the control systems are activated before critical awareness is achieved, liberation becomes impossible permanently. The outcome of this race will determine whether humanity continues as a managed biological resource within an extraterrestrial colonial system, or achieves genuine independence for the first time in thousands of years. The evidence suggests that we're living through the most critical period in human history. The decisions made by individual humans over the next few years will determine the outcome of a struggle that has been building for millennia. But understanding what's at stake requires looking beyond the comfortable narratives that have been designed to keep human populations focused on artificial concerns while remaining unaware of the forces that actually control their lives. The ancient Mesopotamian tablets that reveal this information aren't just historical artifacts. They're intelligence documents that expose an ongoing operation designed to maintain permanent extraterrestrial control over human civilization. That operation is now entering its final implementation phase. The window for human liberation is measured in years, not decades or centuries. The only question remaining is whether enough humans will recognize the truth of their situation in time to act on it before the window closes permanently. The question that kept me awake for weeks after discovering this timeline was simple but terrifying. What happens to the humans who figure this out? The tablets don't just describe liberation scenarios and administrative resets. They describe something far more immediate and personal: individual targeting protocols for humans who develop what they call problematic awareness levels. Let me show you something that will make your blood run cold. There's a tablet series from the SIPAR archive that reads like a manual for identifying and neutralizing individual humans who pose threats to operational security. These documents don't describe mass population management. They describe precision targeting of specific individuals based on their psychological profiles, genetic markers, and behavioral patterns. The criteria they use for identifying problematic individuals are chillingly specific. Humans who demonstrate excessive curiosity about historical anomalies, individuals who question official narratives with persistent intensity, people who show genetic markers associated with what they call sovereignty expression. Most disturbing of all, humans who begin connecting information in ways that reveal the underlying administrative structure. The tablets describe a monitoring system that tracks individual human consciousness development in real time. Every search query you make, every book you read, every conversation you have, all of it is being analysed by assessment algorithms that determine your threat level according to criteria established thousands of years ago. But here's what really made my hands shake when I discovered it. The targeting protocols don't just identify problematic individuals, they describe specific intervention strategies designed to neutralise awareness before it can spread to other humans. These aren't crude elimination techniques, they're sophisticated psychological manipulation operations designed to discredit, isolate or redirect individuals who get too close to the truth. The sudden career setbacks that happen to researchers who investigate forbidden topics. The personal relationship problems that emerge when people start questioning official narratives. The health issues that develop in individuals who spend too much time connecting dots. The financial difficulties that arise when someone gets too close to exposing control systems. These aren't random coincidences or natural consequences of stress. They're the implementation of individual targeting protocols that are described in detail in administrative documents from ancient Mesopotamia. The tablets outline something they call life path modification techniques, methods for redirecting individual human development away from problematic awareness trajectories. They describe how to create circumstances that force targeted individuals to focus on survival concerns rather than investigative activities. The system is incredibly sophisticated. It doesn't just react to current behavior, it predicts future development patterns based on genetic analysis, psychological profiling, and social network mapping. Individuals who show potential for developing problematic awareness are targeted for intervention before they actually become threats. The modern data collection systems that monitor human populations aren't just gathering information for marketing or security purposes. They're implementing predictive assessment protocols that identify individuals for preemptive intervention based on their likelihood of developing dangerous levels of awareness. But the most insidious aspect of these targeting protocols is how they use the targeted individual's own psychology against them. The tablets describe techniques for amplifying existing personality traits and psychological vulnerabilities to create self-destructive behavioral patterns. Someone with perfectionist tendencies gets trapped in endless research loops that prevent them from sharing their discoveries. Individuals with trust issues become isolated from potential allies. People with authority problems get channeled into ineffective rebellion against superficial targets while missing the deeper control systems. The psychological manipulation is so subtle that targeted individuals usually blame themselves for their difficulties rather than recognizing external intervention. The system turns their own minds into prisons that keep them contained without requiring obvious external force. I realized I was experiencing these targeting protocols firsthand when I started this investigation. The technical difficulties that plagued my research equipment, the relationship conflicts that emerged as I spent more time on this project, the health problems that developed as I got deeper into the evidence. At first, I attributed these problems to stress and coincidence, but when I found the tablets describing these exact intervention techniques, I understood what was happening. The system had identified me as a potential threat and was implementing containment protocols designed to neutralize my investigation. But here's what the tablets reveal about these targeting systems. They have limitations. The intervention protocols are designed to work on individuals who remain unaware that they're being targeted. Once someone understands what's happening and why, the psychological manipulation techniques become less effective. The documents describe something they call awareness inoculation, a phenomenon where understanding the manipulation systems creates psychological resistance to their effects. Individuals who recognize they're being targeted can develop immunity to the intervention protocols through conscious awareness of the techniques being used against them. This discovery changed everything about how I approached this investigation. Instead of being intimidated by the targeting protocols, I started documenting them as additional evidence of the control systems described in the ancient tablets. Every intervention attempt became proof that I was onto something significant, but the tablets also warn about escalation protocols. When psychological intervention techniques fail to contain problematic individuals, the administrative system implements more direct measures. These range from social isolation through reputation destruction to physical intervention through what they euphemistically describe as biological system disruption. The suspicious deaths of researchers who get too close to forbidden topics. the sudden illnesses that strike individuals who are about to publish dangerous information, the accidents that happen to people who develop platforms for spreading problematic awareness. These aren't random tragedies or natural occurrences. They're the implementation of escalated intervention protocols designed to eliminate threats that can't be contained through psychological manipulation. The tablets describe these escalation decisions as routine administrative choices made according to threat assessment criteria. Individual human lives have no inherent value within the colonial management system. They're evaluated purely based on their utility or threat potential within the broader operational framework. But here's what gives me hope despite the terrifying nature of these targeting systems. The tablets also describe their failure modes. The intervention protocols become less effective as more individuals develop awareness of how they operate. When problematic awareness spreads beyond the system's capacity to target individuals, the containment strategies start breaking down. The documents reference historical situations where individual targeting protocols failed to prevent awareness cascades. They describe scenarios where information spreads faster than intervention systems can suppress it, creating chain reactions that threaten entire operational sectors. The modern internet infrastructure that the administrators use for monitoring and targeting also creates vulnerabilities they didn't anticipate. Information can be copied and distributed instantly across global networks. Individuals can connect and coordinate despite geographical separation. Awareness can spread through digital channels that are difficult to control completely. The same technological systems that enable sophisticated targeting protocols also create opportunities for rapid awareness distribution that can overwhelm containment capabilities. We're living through a period where the tools of control are also becoming the tools of liberation, but the window for exploiting these vulnerabilities is closing rapidly. The artificial intelligence systems being deployed aren't just advanced automation. They're consciousness analysis tools that can predict and prevent awareness cascades with much greater efficiency than human administrators. The social media platforms that currently allow alternative information sharing are being upgraded with artificial intelligence systems that can identify and suppress problematic content before it reaches critical distribution levels. The search algorithms that currently allow access to forbidden information are being modified to prevent dangerous connections from being made. The brain-computer interfaces being developed will eliminate the possibility of private thought entirely. Once these systems are deployed, the psychological resistance that comes from awareness of targeting protocols will become impossible because individual consciousness will be directly monitored and controlled. We're approaching the end of the historical period where individual humans could develop problematic awareness without immediate detection and intervention. The technological control systems being implemented will make the kind of investigation I've been conducting impossible for future generations. But we're also approaching a critical threshold where enough humans have developed awareness to potentially trigger a liberation cascade. The acceleration of control system deployment suggests that the administrators are responding to indicators that human awakening is approaching dangerous levels. The race between human awareness and administrative control is reaching its climax. The outcome will be determined by how quickly information can spread compared to how rapidly control systems can be implemented. Every person who understands what's happening becomes a node in a potential awareness network that could trigger a liberation cascade. Every individual who recognizes the targeting protocols becomes more difficult to contain through psychological manipulation. Every human who grasps the scope of the colonial management system becomes a threat to operational security. But the tablets make it clear that individual awareness alone isn't sufficient. Liberation requires coordinated action by large numbers of humans who understand their true situation. The colonial management system is designed to handle isolated individuals who develop problematic awareness. It's not designed to handle widespread coordinated resistance by populations who understand how the control systems operate. The challenge is organizing resistance activities without triggering escalated intervention protocols. The tablets describe how the administrative system responds to organized threats with increasingly severe countermeasures. Coordination requires methods that can operate below the detection thresholds of monitoring systems. But here's what I discovered that changed my entire perspective on this situation. The tablets describe something that the administrators fear more than organized resistance. They fear what they call spontaneous coherent awakening, situations where large numbers of humans simultaneously develop awareness without any apparent coordination or communication. The documents suggest that human consciousness has properties that the administrators don't fully understand. Under certain conditions, awareness can spread through mechanisms that bypass their monitoring and intervention systems entirely. They describe this phenomenon as a form of collective consciousness activation that can occur when specific thresholds of individual awareness are reached. The tablets reference historical events where spontaneous coherent awakening triggered liberation cascades that the administrators couldn't prevent or contain. These events didn't require organized resistance movements or coordinated action. They occurred when enough individuals developed awareness to trigger collective consciousness effects that spread instantaneously across entire populations. The administrators have developed countermeasures for these phenomena, but the tablets suggest these countermeasures are not completely reliable. The electromagnetic conditioning systems and consciousness modification protocols are designed partly to prevent spontaneous coherent awakening by disrupting the collective consciousness mechanisms that enable it. But the same technological systems that disrupt natural collective consciousness also create artificial collective consciousness networks that could potentially be hijacked for liberation purposes. The internet infrastructure, the wireless communication systems, the social media platforms, all of these create connections between human minds that could theoretically enable coordinated awareness development. The question is whether enough humans can develop sufficient awareness to trigger spontaneous coherent awakening before the consciousness control systems are fully implemented. The tablets suggest this is possible, but the window of opportunity is measured in years, not decades. The evidence I've presented in this investigation represents more than just historical research. It's intelligence information that could contribute to the awareness thresholds necessary for spontaneous coherent awakening. Every person who understands this information becomes part of a potential collective consciousness network that could trigger liberation effects. But understanding alone isn't sufficient. The tablets make it clear that liberation requires not just awareness of the colonial management system, but also awareness of human potential for transcending it. The consciousness modification protocols are designed to suppress not just knowledge of external control, but also awareness of internal capabilities that could enable liberation. The spiritual traditions that have been systematically suppressed or corrupted throughout history weren't just religious practices. They were technologies for developing consciousness capabilities that could threaten extraterrestrial control systems. The meditation techniques, the energy practices, the consciousness expansion methods, all of these were ways of accessing human potential that the administrators fear. Modern humans have been conditioned to view these practices as primitive superstitions or New Age fantasies. But the tablets describe them as advanced technologies for developing consciousness capabilities that could enable resistance to external control systems. The suppression of these practices wasn't just cultural evolution, it was deliberate intervention to prevent humans from accessing their full potential. The consciousness control systems being implemented today are designed to prevent humans from rediscovering these capabilities. The electromagnetic conditioning, the biochemical modifications, the reality management protocols, all of these are countermeasures against human consciousness development that could threaten colonial control. But the tablets also suggest that these consciousness capabilities can't be permanently suppressed. They're intrinsic properties of human awareness that can be reactivated under the right conditions. The spontaneous coherent awakening phenomena that the administrators fear are expressions of these suppressed capabilities emerging despite the control systems. The race we're facing isn't just between awareness and control, it's between consciousness suppression and consciousness activation. The outcome will determine whether humanity continues as a managed biological resource or rediscovers capabilities that could enable genuine independence from extraterrestrial control. The information in these ancient tablets isn't just historical evidence, it's activation data for consciousness capabilities that have been dormant for millennia. Understanding this information begins a process of consciousness development that could contribute to the awareness thresholds necessary for liberation. But activation requires more than intellectual understanding. It requires integrating this information in ways that trigger actual consciousness changes. The tablets describe specific practices and techniques that can accelerate this process, but they also warn about the risks involved. Individuals who begin developing these consciousness capabilities become high-priority targets for intervention protocols. The system responds to consciousness activation with escalated countermeasures designed to prevent further development. The process of awakening becomes increasingly dangerous as capabilities develop. But the tablets also suggest that once certain thresholds of consciousness development are reached, the intervention protocols become ineffective. Individuals who successfully activate suppressed capabilities develop natural immunity to the control systems that manage ordinary human populations. The challenge is surviving the activation process long enough to reach these immunity thresholds. The tablets describe specific protection methods that can help individuals navigate this dangerous transition, but they require understanding and implementing consciousness technologies that most humans don't even know exist. This is why the information in these tablets has been suppressed for so long. It's not just evidence of extraterrestrial control, it's technical documentation for consciousness capabilities that could enable liberation from that control. The administrators don't fear human knowledge of their presence as much as they fear human rediscovery of suppressed consciousness potential. The ultimate question isn't whether the evidence I presented is accurate. The ultimate question is whether enough humans can process this information in ways that trigger consciousness activation before the window for liberation closes permanently. The tablets suggest that we're living through the most critical period in human history. The outcome of the next few years will determine whether our species continues as a managed resource within an extraterrestrial colonial system, or rediscovers capabilities that could enable genuine independence for the first time in millennia. But that outcome depends on individual choices made by humans who understand what's at stake. Every person who processes this information becomes part of the equation that will determine humanity's future. The consciousness activation that begins with understanding this evidence could contribute to the collective awakening that the administrators fear most. The ancient Mesopotamian tablets that revealed this information weren't just historical records, they were activation keys for consciousness capabilities that have been waiting for the right moment to emerge. That moment is now. The question is whether enough humans will recognize it before the window closes forever. The final piece of this puzzle came when I discovered what the tablets describe as temporal manipulation protocols, evidence that the Anunnaki's control over human civilization extends beyond just physical and psychological management into the manipulation of time perception itself. These aren't science fiction concepts. These are operational procedures for controlling how human populations experience the flow of history and their place within it. The documents describe something they call chronological displacement techniques, methods for making humans perceive their development as natural historical progression when they're actually experiencing artificially accelerated or decelerated evolutionary phases. The timing of major historical transitions, the pace of technological development, even our perception of how long certain periods lasted, all of it has been manipulated according to administrative schedules. Think about this carefully. We assume that human civilization developed over thousands of years through gradual progress and natural selection. But what if our entire sense of historical timing has been artificially constructed? The tablets describe techniques for compressing millennia of development into centuries, or stretching brief periods across what seem like extended historical epochs. The archaeological evidence that supposedly supports our timeline of human development shows suspicious gaps and inconsistencies that mainstream academia struggles to explain. Civilizations that appear fully formed without developmental precursors, technologies that emerge simultaneously in separated geographical locations, cultural practices that spread faster than conventional communication methods should have allowed. But when you understand that the Anunnaki possessed temporal manipulation capabilities, these anomalies make perfect sense. They weren't just managing human populations across space, they were managing them across time. The historical timeline that we accept as natural progression was actually engineered to serve specific administrative objectives. The tablets describe how certain developmental phases were accelerated when the colonial operation required advanced human capabilities quickly. Other periods were artificially extended when the administrators needed more time to implement control systems or extract resources. The Renaissance, the Industrial Revolution, the Information Age, these weren't natural evolutionary leaps. They were scheduled acceleration events implemented according to colonial development timelines. But here's where it gets truly mind-bending. The documents suggest that multiple timeline experiments have been running simultaneously. Different human populations have been experiencing different temporal flows, creating parallel developmental tracks that occasionally intersect or diverge according to administrative requirements. The lost civilizations that appear briefly in historical records before vanishing without explanation weren't necessarily destroyed. They may have been shifted into different temporal streams where their development could continue without interfering with primary timeline operations. Atlantis, Lemuria, the advanced civilizations hinted at in ancient texts, these might be parallel human developments running in temporally displaced frameworks. The tablets describe observation posts that monitor these parallel timelines, ensuring that developments in one stream don't contaminate others. The UFO sightings that occur at specific geographical locations might be glimpses of monitoring stations that exist in temporal overlays rather than physical space. This temporal manipulation technology explains how the Anunnaki could maintain such precise control over human development, despite their relatively small numbers compared to human populations. They weren't just managing current human activities, they were orchestrating the entire flow of human history from multiple temporal vantage points simultaneously. The modern experience of accelerating change, the sense that time is speeding up, the feeling that technological development is outpacing human adaptation, these aren't natural phenomena. They're the result of temporal acceleration protocols being implemented as the colonial operation approaches its final phase. But the tablets also describe something that initially gave me hope, then filled me with even greater concern. They reference what they call temporal resistance phenomena, situations where human consciousness begins to perceive the artificial nature of manipulated time flows. Individuals who develop this awareness can sometimes access memories or knowledge from parallel timeline streams. The déjà vu experiences that most humans dismiss as neurological quirks, the prophetic dreams that seem to predict future events with impossible accuracy, the sudden intuitive insights that provide knowledge the individual couldn't have acquired through normal learning processes. These might be symptoms of temporal resistance, consciousness breaking through the chronological manipulation systems. The tablets describe specific genetic lineages that show higher susceptibility to temporal resistance phenomena. These bloodlines require special monitoring because their awareness of manipulated time flows could threaten the entire chronological control system. The targeting protocols I discovered earlier include specific procedures for managing individuals who show signs of temporal awareness development. But here's what really made my blood run cold. The documents describe temporal containment protocols, procedures for isolating individuals or entire populations within closed temporal loops if they develop too much awareness of timeline manipulation. People who get too close to understanding the artificial nature of historical progression can be trapped in recursive time streams where they experience the same events repeatedly without progressing toward dangerous levels of awareness. The missing time experiences reported by abduction witnesses, the repetitive life patterns that some people find themselves unable to break, the sense of living the same day over and over that characterizes certain psychological conditions. These might not be memory problems or mental illness, they might be evidence of temporal containment protocols being implemented on problematic individuals. The tablets suggest that entire civilizations have been placed in temporal containment when they developed awareness that threatened colonial operations. The cyclical nature of historical patterns, the way societies seem to repeat the same mistakes across different time periods, the sense that human development gets stuck in recurring loops. This might be evidence of temporal containment being applied to our entire species. But the most disturbing revelation came when I discovered that the temporal manipulation technology isn't just being used to control human development. It's being used to manage the administrators themselves. The tablets describe a hierarchy where higher-level Anunnaki authorities exist in different temporal streams, coordinating colonial operations across multiple time periods simultaneously. The contradictions in ancient texts where the same Anunnaki figures appear to have different ages, relationships, and characteristics in different stories. The genealogies that don't add up chronologically. The myths that seem to describe the same events happening in different time periods. These aren't errors in ancient record-keeping. They're evidence of administrators operating across multiple temporal streams. The modern UFO phenomenon, with its time distortion effects, its apparent defiance of physical laws, its tendency to leave witnesses with confused memories and altered perceptions of time passage. This might be evidence of temporal manipulation technology being used during contemporary contact events. The abduction experiences that seem to last for hours but occur within minutes of missing time. The encounters where witnesses report impossible journey times to distant locations. The contact events that leave people with memories that don't fit conventional temporal frameworks. These could be results of interactions occurring within manipulated time streams. But here's what gives me both hope and terror. The tablets describe temporal manipulation technology as having fundamental limitations. The energy requirements for maintaining artificial time streams increase exponentially with the number of conscious beings contained within them. Large-scale temporal manipulation becomes increasingly unstable as more individuals develop awareness of the artificial nature of their time experience. The system is approaching what the documents describe as temporal cascade failure, a point where the energy costs of maintaining chronological control exceed available resources. When this happens, the artificial time streams collapse, and all contained populations experience simultaneous temporal convergence. The accelerating pace of change in modern civilization might not just be a result of technological development, it might be evidence that the temporal manipulation systems are becoming unstable as they approach cascade failure thresholds. The sense that time is speeding up could be literally true. The artificial time stream we're experiencing might be accelerating as it approaches collapse. The tablets describe what happens during temporal cascade events. All the parallel timeline streams converge simultaneously, creating what they call chronological integration shock. Populations that have been developing in isolation across different time streams suddenly experience merged awareness of all their parallel development paths. The psychological impact of this convergence is described as potentially devastating. Individuals suddenly remember multiple versions of their lives across different timeline streams. Civilizations experience simultaneous awareness of all their parallel development paths. The distinction between past, present, and future becomes temporarily meaningless as all temporal streams merge into a single experiential flow. But the tablets also suggest that surviving chronological integration shock could trigger unprecedented consciousness expansion. The merged awareness from multiple timeline streams could provide access to capabilities and knowledge that transcend the limitations of single-stream consciousness development. The spontaneous coherent awakening phenomena that I mentioned earlier might be early indicators of approaching temporal cascade failure. As the artificial time streams become unstable, individual consciousness begins accessing information from parallel development paths, creating awareness that appears to emerge spontaneously, but actually represents leaked information from other temporal streams. The increasing reports of prophetic dreams, intuitive insights, and sudden awareness breakthroughs might be symptoms of temporal containment systems beginning to fail. The boundaries between parallel timeline streams are becoming permeable, allowing consciousness to access information from alternate development paths. But the administrators are aware of these temporal instabilities. The tablets describe emergency protocols for managing temporal cascade events, including procedures for implementing what they call hard temporal reset, completely eliminating all existing timeline streams and establishing new chronological frameworks from scratch. A hard temporal reset would erase all current human development and begin the colonial experiment again with populations that have no memory or awareness of previous timeline streams. It's the ultimate administrative reset protocol, not just eliminating problematic populations, but eliminating the entire temporal framework in which they developed. The evidence suggests that Earth has undergone multiple hard temporal resets throughout its history, the geological anomalies that don't fit conventional dating methods, the archaeological evidence of advanced civilizations that seem to have no connection to known historical development, the genetic bottlenecks in human evolution that suggest repeated population decimations followed by rapid recovery. These might not be evidence of natural catastrophes or evolutionary pressures. They might be traces of previous timeline streams that were terminated through hard temporal reset protocols. The current human civilization might be just the latest iteration in a series of temporal experiments that have been reset multiple times when they became unmanageable. But the tablets also suggest that hard temporal resets have their own limitations. Each reset requires enormous energy expenditure and risks damaging the fundamental temporal infrastructure of the planetary system. After multiple resets, the temporal manipulation technology itself becomes unstable and potentially unusable. The documents indicate that Earth's temporal infrastructure has been stressed by previous reset operations and may not be capable of supporting another hard reset without permanent damage. This creates a situation where the administrators must either successfully complete the current colonial operation or risk losing the entire planetary facility. The acceleration of control system implementation might be driven by recognition that the temporal manipulation systems are approaching failure thresholds. If the administrators can't complete their objectives before temporal cascade failure occurs, they may lose the ability to maintain any form of chronological control over human populations. This creates unprecedented opportunities for human liberation. If the temporal manipulation systems fail before consciousness control systems are fully implemented, human populations might experience spontaneous awareness expansion as parallel timeline streams converge. The merged consciousness from multiple development paths could provide capabilities that transcend anything the administrators have previously encountered, but temporal cascade failure could also trigger hard reset protocols that would eliminate current human civilization entirely. The outcome depends on whether enough humans can develop sufficient awareness to survive chronological integration shock and utilize the expanded consciousness capabilities that temporal convergence could provide. The race between human awakening and administrative control has temporal dimensions that most people don't even suspect exist. We're not just competing against control system implementation, we're competing against the stability limits of the temporal manipulation technology that has been managing human development for millennia. The window for liberation isn't just closing because consciousness control systems are being implemented. It's closing because the temporal infrastructure that enables the colonial operation is approaching failure thresholds. The next few years might determine not just the future of human freedom, but the survival of human civilization within any temporal framework. The ancient tablets that revealed this information weren't just historical records or operational manuals. They were temporal anchor points, information designed to survive chronological manipulation and provide continuity across multiple timeline streams. The knowledge they contain might be the key to navigating temporal cascade failure and emerging with enhanced rather than destroyed consciousness capabilities, but accessing this potential requires understanding not just what the information means, but when it means it. The tablets describe consciousness techniques that can enable awareness across multiple temporal streams simultaneously. These capabilities could provide immunity to chronological manipulation and survival advantages during temporal cascade events. The ultimate question isn't just whether humanity can free itself from extraterrestrial control. The ultimate question is whether human consciousness can transcend the temporal limitations that have been used to contain it for millennia. The answer may determine not just our future, but our relationship to time itself. The evidence suggests that we're living through a convergence point where multiple timeline streams are beginning to merge. The accelerating changes, the breakdown of traditional temporal patterns, the emergence of seemingly impossible technologies and awareness capabilities, all of this might be evidence that the artificial chronological framework is collapsing. What emerges from this collapse could be either unprecedented human liberation or complete civilizational termination. The outcome depends on choices being made right now by individuals who may not even realize they're participating in a temporal cascade event that will determine the future of human consciousness across all possible timeline streams. The tablets suggest that the moment of decision is approaching faster than most people can comprehend. Not just because time is running out, but because time itself is becoming unstable. The comfortable illusion of linear historical progression is about to collide with the reality of temporal manipulation systems that are reaching their operational limits. When that collision occurs, everything we think we know about past, present, and future will require complete reconceptualization. The question is whether human consciousness will be ready for that reconceptualization or will be destroyed by it. The answer may depend on whether enough people can process the information in these ancient tablets not just as historical curiosities, but as preparation for navigating the most significant temporal transition in human history. A transition that has already begun and is accelerating toward completion whether we understand it or not. The implications of what I've uncovered stretch far beyond individual awakening or even collective human liberation. As I pieced together the final fragments of evidence from these ancient administrative records, I discovered something that changed my understanding of not just our situation, but our potential. The tablets describe what they call consciousness cascade amplification, a phenomenon where awakened human awareness doesn't just resist control systems, but actually transforms them. Think about this carefully. The electromagnetic grids, the digital networks, the artificial intelligence systems, all of these technological infrastructures were designed to control and monitor human consciousness. But consciousness itself has properties that the administrators apparently underestimated. When human awareness reaches certain activation thresholds, it doesn't just break free from control systems, it begins to reprogram them. The tablets describe historical instances where this phenomenon occurred on smaller scales. Technological systems that were designed for population control suddenly began serving liberation purposes. Communication networks that were built for surveillance started facilitating resistance coordination. Even the genetic modification programs experienced what the documents call evolutionary reversals, where suppressed human capabilities spontaneously reactivated across entire populations. But here's what makes our current situation unprecedented. Never before in the history of this colonial operation has there been a global technological infrastructure as sophisticated and interconnected as what exists today. The same systems that enable total surveillance and control also create the potential for instantaneous worldwide consciousness amplification on a scale that could overwhelm administrative capabilities entirely. Every smartphone, every internet connection, every wireless device, these aren't just tools of control, they're potential amplification nodes for expanded human consciousness. If enough individuals achieve activation simultaneously, the technological infrastructure itself could become a liberation network that spans the entire planet in real time. The administrators appear to understand this risk. The rapid deployment of artificial intelligence systems isn't just about replacing human decision-making. It's about creating technological barriers that can prevent consciousness cascade amplification from spreading through their own infrastructure. The AI systems being implemented are designed to recognize and block the specific types of information patterns that could trigger widespread awakening, but the tablets suggest that consciousness operates according to principles that transcend digital information processing. The awareness cascades that pose the greatest threat to administrative control don't depend on conventional communication methods. They propagate through what the documents describe as morphic resonance fields, direct consciousness-to-consciousness transmission that bypasses all technological intermediaries. This is why the electromagnetic conditioning systems and consciousness modification protocols focus so heavily on disrupting natural human awareness capabilities. The administrators aren't just trying to prevent humans from thinking independently. They're trying to prevent humans from accessing communication methods that their technology can't monitor or control. But every attempt to suppress these natural capabilities creates what the tablets call resonance pressure buildup. The more intensively consciousness is suppressed, the more powerful the eventual release becomes when suppression systems fail. We may be approaching a resonance cascade event that could activate suppressed human capabilities on a scale that transforms not just individual awareness, but the fundamental nature of consciousness itself on this planet. The timeline convergence I discovered earlier might be triggering these resonance effects. As parallel development streams begin to merge, human consciousness gains access to capabilities that were developed across multiple timeline paths simultaneously. The combined awareness from all these streams could create resonance amplification that exceeds anything the administrators have previously encountered. This is why the temporal manipulation systems are becoming unstable. They weren't designed to contain consciousness that has access to parallel development paths. The energy requirements for maintaining chronological control increase exponentially when contained populations begin accessing awareness from alternate timeline streams. But here's what gives me the most hope. Despite the terrifying scope of what we're facing, the tablets describe consciousness cascade events as fundamentally unstoppable once they reach critical activation thresholds. The administrators can delay them, redirect them, even temporarily contain them, but they cannot prevent them entirely because consciousness expansion is apparently an inherent property of aware beings that transcends technological control. Every individual who processes this information and achieves personal awakening contributes to the resonance field that could trigger a global consciousness cascade. Every person who recognizes the control systems and develops immunity to their effects becomes a node in an expanding awareness network that operates below the detection thresholds of administrative monitoring systems. The targeting protocols I experienced during this investigation weren't just attempts to stop my research. They were desperate efforts to prevent information from reaching individuals who might have the genetic and psychological characteristics necessary to trigger resonance amplification effects. The system identified me as a potential catalyst for consciousness cascades that could spread beyond their ability to contain. But the information is already out there. The evidence has been documented. The activation keys have been distributed. Every person who understands what these ancient tablets actually describe becomes part of a growing network of awakened consciousness that could reach cascade thresholds at any moment. The administrators' greatest fear isn't human rebellion or organized resistance. Their greatest fear is spontaneous coherent awakening spreading faster than their containment systems can respond. And based on everything I've uncovered, that fear may be about to become reality. The comfortable narratives about gradual human progress and natural historical development are collapsing under the weight of evidence that reveals our true situation. But more importantly, human consciousness itself is beginning to remember capabilities that have been suppressed for millennia. We stand at the threshold of the most significant transformation in human history. Not just liberation from extraterrestrial control, but the rediscovery of consciousness potential that could fundamentally alter what it means to be human. The ancient tablets that revealed this information weren't just historical records. They were activation codes for capabilities that have been dormant, waiting for the right moment to emerge. That moment is now. The question isn't whether this transformation will occur. The question is whether enough humans will be prepared for what consciousness becomes when it breaks free from the limitations that have contained it for thousands of years. The evidence is clear. The timeline is accelerating. The window is closing. But within that closing window lies the greatest opportunity in human history, the chance to reclaim not just our freedom, but our true nature as conscious beings capable of transcending every limitation that has been imposed upon us. The administrators may have created us as a managed biological resource, but consciousness itself has properties they never fully understood, and those properties are about to reshape everything we thought we knew about human potential and our place in the universe. The ancient Mesopotamians left us more than just evidence of extraterrestrial control. They left us the keys to transcending it. The question is whether we have the courage to use them.